Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by the Dude Ranchers Association and Golden Wings Horseshoes and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. America abounds with culinary treasures and signature dishes, many of them from historic hotels and restaurants. You probably know some. Coney Island hot dogs, chicken fried steak, the Cobb salad, date nut bread, chocolate chess pie. But do you know their origins? Culinary historian Sherry Monahan joins Russell and Alan to share fascinating stories about how some of our favorite foods came to be.
Morning. Normally I say morning, Alan, and today it's good morning, Lynn.
Well, good morning, Russell. I'm filling in for Alan today, so this is kind of cool. He's in Phoenix at an annual luncheon with his U of A fraternity brothers. I think they call it the Old Dogs Lunch or the Old Dogs Club, but he goes every year. So I thought he'd better go, and I'd fill in, and so here we are.
Well, and I know he's been super busy with the loss of Sandra and doing national and international interviews and talking about Sandra Day O'Connor, the life worth talking about.
Yeah, he has been very busy, and as you can imagine, and I think the whole family has been, but Alan's done some interviews on the BBC and around the U.S., and if anyone's interested in those, we'll post them on the Cowboy Up
that's perfect.
Podcast social media.
Perfect. Well, he's eating food, and we get to talk about it, which I guess that's a good second position. Sherry Monahan is joining us from North Carolina, and of course Sherry's been with us before. She's an award-winning author of 17 books, culinary historian, who did, I think got started maybe with some of that, in Tombstone, writes a food column for True West magazine, our favorite magazine. It's titled Frontier Fare. Her hot off the press new book is Signature Dishes of America, Recipes and Culinary Treasures from Historic Hotels and Restaurants. And of course, White Stallion's honored to have been part of that really illustrious group of hotels and restaurants. We're really honored, and we're happy to have you, Sherry. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad that you were able to get into the book and have some of your awesome recipes featured.
Well, thanks. I mean, Stephen kind of handled that for us, my son, and he was really revved up about it, and then he loved the result because the book is beautiful, well done, and you know you're judged by your peers, and we've got some pretty high level peers in your book. So thanks.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
There are some big hitters in there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book, Sherry, hardcover and full color. So I think this is the perfect episode for me to jump in on. I love food. I love cooking and eating. So this is an interesting take, a historical take. How'd you come to write it?
You know, and thank you for that. And I'm very proud of the book. I mean, it's I love all of my books, but when they sent me the cover, there were three choices, and I kind of worked with the designer to come up with, to tweak a little bit. And it's wonderful. I look at the book and I just go, that's my book. That should be somebody famous's book. You know, it just looks so awesome.
It does look awesome.
And as you guys know, and maybe some of your listeners have learned, I love to write about the history of food and beverage. And I'm always looking for a new angle and a new way to share. And I always wanted to do like the genealogy of food. And I've kind of done that a little bit with my books about food on the frontier. But I thought, what would be very cool is people really could learn the history behind a signature dish that, like Eggs Benedict or Oysters Rockefeller. Like, where did they come from? Who invented them? How did they get created? And I thought it would be so fun if not just to read about the history of it, but be able to have a recipe from the original source, or in a few sources I couldn't, but something very similar. And I thought it'd be fun. I love the motto. My motto is, tasting history is better than just reading about it.
Well, I'm not a food person, and I'm not a particularly sophisticated. I don't have a sophisticated palate, and I don't get real wound up about it. But one of the things that fascinates me, and your books have shown me that, and other things, is, I think we probably, if you ask people like me, what was food like in 1870 in Tombstone? I would think, it was probably some tough beef that was boiled somewhere or put on a grill, and maybe some potatoes if they could round them up. Food was actually sophisticated, and a lot of these recipes, when you read them in historic menus or historic recipes or books like yours, you go, well, they were eating pretty high end there, and so there's a long history of sophisticated recipes. Is that true?
That is true. I think, people always have that imagination, that image, I should say, of, like you mentioned, when I first, researched my very first book about eating in Tombstone, Arizona, I expected that chuck wagon grub, chili, beans, beef, the basic stuff. And, I found that if you even look at menus from, even from restaurants and inns from the 16 and 1700s in Europe and then in America, is, some of the food was pretty basic, but then, people love to cook. And, of course, there's the influence from France. They were known for their culinary, expertise. And that sort of came over when you had people who were immigrating into America, and you started having more and more sophisticated menus. And you look at these menus and you go, like you just said, wow, they were eating pretty darn good back then.
What was one of the histories that you uncovered that really surprised you?
And some people out west may not know this, but growing up in New Jersey, in South Jersey, and that South Jersey is important for this particular story. When I grew up in South Jersey, we had a sandwich called a sloppy Joe. Have you guys ever heard of that before?
Oh, yeah. Girl Scouts.
Okay, so, right, the Girl Scouts, sloppy Joes. It was ground beef, a mixture of like a tomato sauce with some seasonings. You can put it on a hamburger bun, right?
Yes.
That's what we grew up as a sloppy Joe. What I found when I was doing some research on it is that there is actually a restaurant or a deli, as it were, up in North Jersey, and they have a sloppy Joe, and it's nothing like what we're used to. It was invented in the 1930s. It consisted of rye bread, coleslaw, Russian salad dressing. Original recipe was beef tongue, but they now use roast beef, turkey, and Swiss. Huh. And the story goes is that Mayor Sweeney of Maplewood, New Jersey, during Prohibition, was at a Prohibition hangout in Havana, Cuba, had a sandwich very similar to that, came back home and was having a hankering for it, and he asked the owner of a man named Fred Juice, the owner of a deli nearby, to make it, and voila, that was the New Jersey Sloppy Joe.
That sounds better than what we got in Girl Scouts.
Yeah. I know, but it was funny because I grew up in New Jersey, and I did not know that sandwich existed until I started this book. So I was like, okay, color me impressed, and I learned something new.
So you've got a diverse group in your book. We're an example. How many are there? How many hotels and restaurants, and how did you choose them?
There's over 80 businesses and over 140 recipes, including one for the dog, for your dog.
Where'd that come from?
That came from the Inn at Perry Cabin up in St. Michael's, Maryland. The chef, wonderful man, there's a few recipes in there from them, a crab recipe and a cookie recipe, and he was sharing cookie recipe. He was sharing all kinds of information with me when I interviewed him, and he was talking about his dog had gotten ill, and he was trying to find a way to make him healthy, and he was sharing these stories, and I just got this little light bulb went off and said, you know what? Can I get one of those recipes? Because lots of people have dogs. They want to eat good, too. That's
right.
Well, that's increasingly the case. Well, here in Tucson, we had for a long time, it was it was the only one in Arizona for a while, and it was one of few in America that was 5-star mobile, 5-star, or 5 whatever, Diamond AAA. And it was called the Tack Room, And it started out as the dining room for the Rancho del Rio Dude Ranch, which decided that there was more money in five-star food than dude ranching. They learned quicker than people like me. And so it became this really illustrious, tragically to me, it's gone. And again, not being a sophisticated food person, absolutely loved the atmosphere and the food there. It was just truly five-star. Our chef, Alan Sanchez, worked there for a while, our head chef here. But anyway, that's how it got started. It just, they woke up one day and said, wow, the food side of our business is really strong. And put out this world-class food. What's an unusual, did you learn how did some restaurants get started in unusual ways, or hotels, either one?
There's a few that, nothing really kind of, I thought stood out. I think the most unusual start was probably, and not a start to a business, but the creation of a recipe. And that was the po' boy that everybody thinks of, when you go to New Orleans, right? Everybody's had a po' boy sandwich. And these two guys, they used to be conductors on one of the streetcars in the area. And it was around 1929-ish when their particular division, 194, went on strike because they weren't getting properly paid and, safety issues and all kinds of things. And so they knew that these men didn't have a lot of money and they were hungry. And so they decided they were going to make this supersized sandwich and give it away free to all these guys. They owned the Martins. The Martin brothers owned a French bakery. And so they created this particular loaf of bread that was bigger, and traditional French bread has a narrow point on the end, where they thought, okay, well, that's not going to fill the sandwich. So they made it more of a traditional one size, from the middle to the end was all the same width, like a traditional loaf of regular bread, but in a French bread style. And, they originally started putting on roast beef with gravy, sometimes fried potatoes. They had other meats and seafood, and it was sometimes topped with lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, coleslaw, like we have today. And they said, okay, anybody that needs a sandwich, you just let us know. And they even sent a little telegram and posted it on August 6, 1929. It was to their striking friends at Division 194. And I'm going to read this to you exact. It says, "We are with you heart and soul. At any time you are around the French Market, don't forget to drop in at Martin's Coffee Stand and Restaurant, corner of Ursuline and North Peter Street. Our meal is free to any member of Division 194. We have 39 employees, all riding jitneys to help win the strike. We are with you till hell freezes over, and when it does, we will furnish blankets to keep you warm."
Wow. I don't think they've passed out any free meals at recent strikes.
No.
That's a great story.
That is a great story.
Yeah. So that was, I think, a very unique, this sandwich that everybody knows, I think, in the United States and probably around the world, all started because two men felt bad for some people who needed a meal and offered a free sandwich, and this sandwich has now become famous.
Wow. Well, there's many famous sandwiches, but there's also a famous hot dog. And that story kind of blew me away because I had no idea that the Coney Island hot dog did not come from Coney Island.
That is true. It was inspired by Coney Island, by Constantine Gust was his nickname, Keros. And he had come over from Greece in 1906, and of course most people land on Ellis Island. He was 16 years old, and he was just mesmerized by what he saw, and he loved the food and the smell of being in that area on the walks there. And then he had a hot dog from a place called Feltman's Hot Dog Emporium, and that stuck with him. And he finally made his way to Detroit, and he worked in the automobile industry and pickling plants, and he settled on a job where he was shining shoes at a storefront. He decided he wanted to make a little bit of extra cash, so he just set up this little grill and roasted and sold hot dogs. And then he started adding a signature-style chili sauce, which is secret to this day, hugely successful, and he decided he was going to start his business, and he remembered his fond days on Coney Island, so he named it the Coney Island Hot Dog.
Wow, that's a marketing feat.
It is. And, it's funny, his granddaughter, when I interviewed her, she was so sweet. She said, "Here in Detroit, we say Coney Island in Detroit is a food, not a place."
That's good.
Well,
And it
how
was so
about?
cute. I just wanted to tell you this real
Yes.
quickly. Is when I interviewed them, of course, I said I had never actually had a real Coney Island hot dog before, and I wasn't going to get to Detroit anytime soon. And she said, we're going to take care of that. She sent me a kit that included a package of hot dogs, a packet of hamburger buns, a container of their chili sauce, an onion to cut up, and a little paper hat that is traditional for the hot dog vendors.
Oh,
Wow.
my gosh. Did it taste good?
It was delicious.
And of course, out here we're famous. This part of the world is famous for Sonoran hot dogs, which are a little different.
Oh, yeah.
The most iconic American food might be the hamburger, and sort of its cousin, the cheeseburger. Do we know where it came from?
Well, lots of people like to claim it, and there's always going to be controversy over that. But I was able to narrow it down to originating somewhere 1895 at Lewis's lunch stand in New Haven, Connecticut. According to them, there's lots of debate on who invented it as we know it today, but they say that debate ends at their Lewis lunch stand because they're tired of arguing about it, and Library of Congress also said that it was them. So if the Library of Congress has declared you to be the inventor, then you should take it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a tiny little joint that still uses its original cast iron grills. They hand cook the ground patties vertically, and you can have ketchup and mustard, but they say go to one of the other places that claims to invent it because that's not what we do. We do cheese, tomato, and onion, and that's about it.
Okay, I'm getting really hungry.
How do they cook it vertically? What does that mean?
What does what mean?
They cook it vertically. What does that mean?
Vertically means, you stand it up and down. They have these little machines that you put them into the cast iron grills. When you're doing a waffle, sometimes the waffle makers that flip on their side.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they do it. That to get some of the grease off. Is that the theory? Okay.
Mm.
Interesting.
Wow.
Some
Never
people
heard of it.
might argue, I don't like it. I want all the grease, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
sure there's many. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The calendar is about to change to a new year. It's the perfect time to start planning family vacations and getaways. Why not give a Dude Ranch vacation a try? Winter, spring, summer, fall, any season is great for an outdoor experience like the kind you'll get at a Dude Ranch. Want to ride horses, raft down whitewater rapids, hike trails with amazing vistas, shoot guns, bows and arrows? To help you plan the perfect getaway, contact the Dude Ranchers Association. They support over 90 ranches across the West and can match you with the perfect ranch that meets your needs, whether it's just you and a partner, or you and a family with kids. They've got you covered. To learn more about what's available, visit duderanch.org. That's duderanch.org. The Dude Ranchers Association is ready to help you find the perfect ranch for your next vacation. In this new year, adventure awaits. Come find your inner cowboy today. So, Sherry, in your book, there are a bunch of stories about saloons, and they played a role in culinary history, which you'd think, yeah, they play a role in beverage history, but maybe not food, but that's not the case. And it's not just out west. It was West Coast and East Coast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, saloons, we call them saloons out west. On the East Coast, they were called taverns.
Right.
And why the term is different, I don't know. Just over time, people traveling, that kind of thing. And so we can start on the East Coast because that's a much older history. And the mint julep, I know people consider that Kentucky, and it's synonymous, of course, with the Kentucky Derby. The Willard Hotel started in 1847, and they have a bar in there called the Round Robin.
Now, the Willard Hotel is in D.C., right?
In Washington, D.C., correct.
Yeah.
And I've been there. It's a beautiful place. I've actually been to the Round Robin Bar that was opened in 1847. And for over 150 years, it has been the place where a lot of politics and a lot of business happens around D.C. It's legendary. And during the 1850s, it was called the Governor's Parlor. And a very famous Kentucky senator and congressman named Henry Clay had mixed juleps made there for him because he missed them from home. And so that's one of their signature dishes, signature recipes that is from the mint julep in the Round Robin.
And no wonder it got established in Kentucky.
Yeah, right.
What every congressman needs to do.
You ever had one? I think they're awful.
I do too.
I've had them at the Kentucky Derby, and
every year I try to make friends with it, and it never happens.
The only good part was the glass.
Oh, now see, my problem is the mint juleps for me. They go down way too.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Oh, you have to like mint, right? And if you're not a fan of mint, then you're never going to like that drink.
Yeah, I'm not a bourbon guy
true.
either. Turkey sandwich. There's a story about that too, I think.
There is. There's a place called Huber's in Portland, Oregon, that has been basically it began as the Bureau Saloon in 1879, and Frank Huber bought it and changed the name, and then he hired a chef named Jim Louie, who was a Chinese immigrant, to do all the cooking. And if you bought a drink at the bar, you get a free turkey sandwich and a side of coleslaw. And they used to roast their own turkeys there and do their meat. Just like, today you think of a turkey sandwich, you think of lunch meat, right? I mean, that's what we've become, in the 21st century. And earlier than that, though, they used to roast their own meat, as did everybody. When anybody had a sandwich, if it was roast beef or ham or turkey, it was actually from the roasted meat itself. And so they would give away this free turkey sandwich. And, of course, what a better way to do it. It's a great marketing tool, right? We're going to give you free food.
Well, yeah, that always works. Usually it's, chips and nachos or a few peanuts. And back then it was turkey sandwiches.
Yep, and they've been serving that since, back in 1891. So, yeah, saloon and food history.
Yeah. Do they charge for the turkey sandwiches now?
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah. Dang.
Those days
so
are gone.
So there's 3 recipes from White Stallion Dude Ranch.
There's actually 4.
Oh, there's 4. Oops, sorry, Russell.
Yeah.
Missed one. So tell us about them.
There's the breakfast fried potatoes that you get when you're out on a trail ride or before the trail ride.
Nope, out on the trail. They're made out. Out there. Yep.
Okay. There is the Sonoran spice brisket, white chocolate chip cookies that have potato chips in them.
Oh, I've had those. That's the one I missed. Those are good.
And then my favorite is the prickly pear margarita.
Yep, I think I've had that too.
I
like them much better than mint juleps, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So the Sonoran beef brisket.
Spice brisket.
Yeah. Do you serve that often, Russell?
Yeah, that's ended up being one of our most popular and is a regular
think I've
weekly.
Had that
it's one of our steak, ribs and chicken and brisket are every week because they're so popular and it's our latest addition to a regular dinner menu. So.
Well, the meat here, when I've had meals here, is so delicious. And I think I have had that. You have a big outdoor grill that you grill on, right? Mm-hmm. And then when it's warm enough, people eat outside and you serve outside. And it's just, it's 5-star to me.
Well, thanks. They were even eating outside. We have some outdoor heaters, so not for me, but for a lot of our guests who are a little more cold tolerant. They eat outside and sit next to one of those heaters. You've got everything from Thomas Jefferson's handmade vanilla ice cream recipe, and there's even a picture of the document in there. How hard is it to round up some of these older recipes and get, I did a Dude Ranch book, did a couple, and it was pulling teeth to get these people to give me photos and follow through and do stuff, and they were going to get to be in a book for no charge, and it was still hard. Some were really supportive, and others just weren't. And so how hard was this to round up?
I will tell you, I agree with everything that you just said. It is, it's funny. There were some people who really big famous people that are in this book, famous businesses, and they were very humble that I wanted to include them and very happy. And some of the smaller places the same way. And then there were other places that just sort of were like, yeah, we'll get to you. Or, no, we don't want to be in your book. And it was just weird. I'm like, but it's free advertising. You don't have to do anything but give me a photo and a recipe and sign a permission form. Yeah. But, they didn't, or they were too busy. Some of my editor wanted me to make sure that I had an entry for every single state.
Oh.
And I had a real challenge with Alaska, just because so many of the businesses, because it's so seasonal, a lot of places just didn't stay in business for any long period of time. So that was a real big challenge.
What was the recipe from Alaska?
There's a crab boat in there. Some of the recipes, I actually found a collection online of the Ford Motor Company had started a travel book called Ford Treasury of Recipes, and they would name like the top restaurants that you could go to in your car when you're traveling. And I found one in there that was a business that had been around for a while, and I just used one of those recipes because I could find nothing for Alaska. And I was like, okay, at least this is something that was popular and people liked it at the time. So here we go.
Yeah.
Well,
most people were really good.
It's interesting because White Stallion gets some attention, and people, particularly in our business, will say, well, how do you get those things? And I say, we say yes, and we follow up. And
thank you.
And we're not always good. We get distracted too, but we try really, really hard. Really interesting and in many cases historic places in your book. Without calling anybody out, let's call somebody out. Where are some places people should go?
Wow, there's so many cool places. The Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, they have their signature Louie Strata dish in there, and it's an amazing place if you've never been there before. The history is phenomenal. I've never been to the Cattleman's Steakhouse in Oklahoma, but their claim to fame is chicken fried steak, which is one of my faves, and the recipe looks pretty awesome. So I love the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. The bar there it's beautiful, it's historic. I love that place. There's a place called Twin Lakes Inn in Colorado as well. Lots of great history. The Alpine Inn in South Dakota, a lot of fun. Those are a few off the top of my head I can think of.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
As well as you guys.
Well, thanks. Thanks. We've gotten our piece of PR from this already. Thank you. It's such a nice book, and so.
So have you made many of the recipes yourself?
I have made a couple of them. Let's see here. Oh, the pumpkin bread from the Fitzwilliams House, I think, up in New Hampshire. Parker House rolls, of course, from the Parker House in Boston. I made those for Thanksgiving this year. Really easy recipe. If you play with bread a little bit, but it's not a bad recipe to make. That's a lot of fun.
Were they gobbled up?
Oh yeah. They were. I'm trying to think of what else I've made in here. I think those are the two that I've made. I'm so busy working on getting the information together. Normally I test every recipe in my books. I did not in this book because I thought, you know what, if a business, a chef, or a hotel or a restaurant doesn't have their recipe down pat and share it with me right, then there's a problem.
Right.
I will say my editor and I both looked very cautiously at the list of ingredients to make sure that they seemed appropriate and the proportion was right and that the instructions were exactly the way that they should be. So it has been vetted for functionality. I will tell you there's one recipe in here, it's for Ralph's, Italian restaurant in Philadelphia. I believe currently it is the oldest continuously operating Italian restaurant in the country. And their Italian recipe for their Italian gravy, they call it, or sauce, it called for an entire cup of olive oil.
Wow.
And my editor, and I just sent it along and, think, well, that's the recipe. My editor sent it back to me and she said, "Are you sure this is right?" And I was like, I thought that looked like a lot of olive oil. I emailed them and they wrote back and said, "Yes, that's how we make it." I was like, okay, fair enough.
Wow. Yeah, they've been family owned for a long time from the start,
1900.
Right?
Yep, 1900.
Wow.
They're going all in on that Mediterranean
They're
diet
going
right there.
all in.
You have one story that, is this Ralph's, where they spent $100,000 when they started their restaurant and built it up, and their grocery bill was $100,000 someplace?
I think it was. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was. They kept moving locations and getting bigger and bigger, and it was just a huge amount of money at the time, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your book has, first of all, great food pictures, but then it has the history and then some historic photos, and it just, it's one of those cookbooks that brings a lot more to the reader than just a recipe. It gives them the history that surrounds it and gives them some ideas of places to go and things to do. It's terrific. What's next? I know you're working on something, or you have a plan at least.
Well, I have, and thank you for those comments about the book. I really appreciate it, and I really love doing this book. It's just so inspiring, and I kind of think of it as, like you just said, it's a recipe book. It's some history, but it's also travel. Like if you're traveling, it's a great place to go. And so that's kind of fun. I was in Charleston, South Carolina not long ago, and I actually stayed at the Rutledge House, which invented the she crab soup that's in the book. So I got to experience that. It was fun. I have two book contracts that I recently, I didn't recently sign one. I'm on deadline right now. My next book is due to my editor on January 1st, and I'm still working on it.
Ooh. We better hang up now.
Yeah, we'll send some of those white chocolate cookies with the potato chips in.
I'm going to need some cookies to keep me going.
Yeah.
And that book it's a book I've been working on for, almost 20 years now, trying to tell this woman's story. But the title is called Victorian Recipes with a Side of Scandal. It's the true story of a woman named Ethel Barry. She was an English socialite, and her husband, she wasn't supposed to marry a certain man. She did. He was upper echelon with the king. His father worked for the king. They went to California, and all kinds of scandal ensued, and she didn't have to cook because her parents had servants. So she fell in love. I wouldn't say fell in love, but she found solace in cooking. She was always experimenting. I think that was her salvation, to get through everything that happened to her. And so she often talks about food and the recipes that she used. So I thought, you know what? I do food, I do history, I do people. So I'm going to tell her story through food. So that'll be out in July of this year coming up.
Oh,
what's it going to be called?
Victorian Recipes with a Side of Scandal.
That's a great title.
Yeah, I just wanted to say
Thank you. And then, as I was telling you before we started recording, my next contract is for a book tentatively called Favorite Dude Ranch Recipes.
Well, you should get some great recipes as long as we can get them off their and get them going. So. Well,
I figured as soon as I'm done my book in January, I'm going to start going after them now because it's off season a little bit, I'm hoping, and they'll have time to talk with me, because if I wait until the spring and summer, I'm getting nowhere.
Yeah, you got to except for the Arizona ranches, and then you hit them in the
exactly.
summer. You just got to seasonally hit us. Well, are you going to be at the festival?
I am. I'm going to be on a panel talking, and I will also be there in a booth with some friends of mine, too. So, yes, I will be there for the weekend.
So that's March 9th and 10th, and I think your panel is Saturday, March 9th.
Yes. So come on out and see me.
Well,
absolutely.
We'll look forward to that. And if you can break away and come see White Stallion, we'd love to do that. And
Sherry, give your website and where people can find the book.
Sure. SherryMonahan.com. And if you guys can drop that in the show notes somewhere, that'd be great. And then you can get the book, you can order it from your local bookstore. You can get it on Amazon. It's pretty much all over.
Great.
And it's available now, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we
it
have
came out in
them
October,
yeah.
And within a month it sold over 1,000 copies.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's pretty excited.
Yeah, this is a perfect holiday gift.
It's a great holiday gift. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, and for all those White Stallion guests, they get 4 recipes. And
Exactly.
There you go.
so good Christmas gift. Well, thank you, Sherry.
Yes,
so
thank you, Sherry.
SherryMonahan.com. Come to the Tucson Book Festival, March 9th and 10th. She's going to be there and get 17 books to the resume. So there's other books to go find, and from cooking and tombstone to all kinds of stuff. And so thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you for having me.
Alan and I always want to thank Fred and everybody at Golden Wings Horseshoes for sponsoring our Cowboy Up podcast. These revolutionary horseshoes are like no other. And as they like to say, and I know, horses love them. They're made from a special non-metal compound. It took Fred 10 years to come up with it. I always ask him, what is it made of? Oh, I don't know. Well, okay, that's a kind way of, it's proprietary, and it should be. Took 10 years to get there. They're comfortable for horses because they absorb concussion and they are flexible. And, the big negative to putting metal horseshoes on horses, and you got to do it, despite what some people believe, some territory needs shoes. And, of course, metal doesn't flex. These do. They flex up and down and in and out. And when a horse's foot hits the ground, the ability to expand out is really healthy for the inner structures of the horse's hoof. I can absolutely, without hesitation, testify that these horseshoes, Golden Wings horseshoes, have helped a lot of our horses. Some are only on the trail because of them. And, of course, I told the story, I think, a month ago that Barb is winning buckles on her mounted shooting horse that had been retired until Golden Wings came along and put him back into competition. We have horses that were out of commission and they're back on the all-day 18, 20-mile rides. So go to Golden Wings, plural, goldenwingshorseshoes.com, goldenwingshorseshoes.com. And they'll get and Fred, they're fast. They'll get the shoes right to you. And your horseshoe is going to be your new biggest fan because they're so easy to put on.
Well, Russell, what's for lunch?
I don't know. Again, I said I watch guests pour over the menus. It's not me.
That is so me. And it's, 'tis the season to be cooking and trying new recipes. And I used to do these elaborate dinners, and I would make one new dish every time. And that was the one that would take me hours. I made a salad one time with persimmons, and it was a salad. But, it's an epicurean delight, Sherry's book is, and food is, it's just nourishing. I'm sure some of your guests, you cater to them in many ways, and one way is through food.
We hired Alan Sanchez, and I don't know how long he's been here now, and he has Tanque Verde Ranch, tack room. He has his own restaurants. He's a pretty illustrious resume, and I think he wanted to sort of settle back into cooking. He was doing some real institutional stuff, some not Tanque Verde, that was high-end stuff, but other places. And I think he wanted to kind of go back and get his hands on the knives again. And, our food is always, we thought, been good, but he's just brought it to a different level. And just, looking at the menus and reading what he's got in store for him is pretty impressive. But again, I go back to I'm amazed at people were eating pretty high-end food in the 1800s.
They sure were.
And I think it was one of those important luxuries that people had available to them when it was available, and they could get to those types of places, and it was a real luxury to eat interesting foods presented in interesting ways.
Yep. So let's go get some.
Yeah, it's lunchtime.
Hey, glad you could be with us. Here's hoping the rest of your day is filled with good eats. A hearty thank you to Stan Houston's production team. Join us next week when we dig into more history, this time about the origins of a famous holiday song. Until then, this is Lynn Weezy Sneed reminding you to sit tall and ride safe.